Hello everybody and welcome to Rest and Reason. I'm RP the Red Panda, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. This one is going to be about how to choose a board game, and I have 5 simple tips to help you out with that. First off, you need to define the goal that you are trying to accomplish with buying a board game, and you can do that with 3 simple questions.
Who approaches the bridge of death must answer me these questions 3.
The first question is, what do you want to experience? Do you want something really relaxing, really energetic, something really thoughtful, something really fun and funny? What do you want to experience with this game? The second question is, who do you want to entertain? Make sure you're thinking about the various different groups you might be playing games with and what they may or may not like. Question number 3 is, how do you want to grow? See, board games are a really great environment to grow as a person. You can get better at social interaction. So I highly encourage trying to find some games that might help you get out of your comfort zone while still being in your comfort zone of gaming. Another thing that this can do is build great friendships. You can build amazingly rich and wonderful friendships through board gaming. You can get games that really make you mesh together better as a group and have shared group experiences that you can talk about that were really interesting and amazing for your group. It also can help you sharpen certain skills. This can be a really great place to grow some of those skills without having as much pressure. Alright, so tip number 2 is find good reviewers. I highly recommend that you watch maybe 2 or 3 reviewers before you buy a board game. A great reviewer, an amazing reviewer, will make you feel what the game feels like before you play the game. Because you could know how a game plays, then play it and realize, wow, that was incredibly boring, but I knew exactly what was coming. But if you know how the game feels, you know exactly that it's going to be that energy you want. And I'm not just talking about myself, I'm talking about many other great board game reviewers, many of which I linked down in the description for various different situations. So go on and check some of those out. Alright, so tip number 3 is vary the games that you buy. In every situation, what would be a good game for that situation? Yes, have lots of games in the main type of mechanic and genre that you like, but also get some games in a mechanic or genre that you don't like as much, but ones of that genre that you do like. So that way, if you have a group of gamers over that isn't your usual type, you will be able to say, hey, I have a game for you guys that I really think would work for you. Tip number 4 is buy the game that fits best. Now, this can actually change based on 2 categories I'm going to put forward. People who are game players and people who are game nerds. Game players are people who like to play games occasionally, but they're not the person who brings board games, they're the person who plays the games brought by somebody else. The nerds are the people bringing the board games to the board game night. Those 2 categories are going to have very different philosophies of what they do when they buy board games. For the player, you are going to buy about 10 to 20 games. I would highly recommend getting at least that many. That way you have a bunch of games that if you aren't at a game night or with a nerd who can give you games, you have those core games that you really love and really know that you can play a lot with other people outside of board gaming groups. For nerds, I would say that you're going to have about 100 to 200 games, but you're not going to get these right away. Try to buy games that are older, not newer. If you get the latest board game, yeah, it might be a really great game in 2005, but then by 2020, nobody plays that game anymore because a way better version of the same exact game came out 10 years later. Or if somebody you really, really trust as a reviewer says this game is a must-have, then yes, try to buy 4 a year. It gives you enough time for you and your game group to play it about 12 times and really get to know the game. So then when you bring it back up in a couple of years, everybody will still remember it because they played it 12 times. Finally, tip number 5 is just me going through what I do in my reviews, which is I am reviewing it both for you as the viewer, but also for me. I am trying to figure out, is this a game that I want to keep or that you should buy? And I do that with my 10 simple things. First off, replayability. This one's kind of obvious. The big question here is, will you play it again? So I would personally recommend you want to be replaying these about 5 to 10 times. If you know you're going to play it about 5 or 10 times when you own it, you know that you're getting your money's worth. It's about $4 a time. $4 for 2 hours is pretty good. You pay $15 to go see a movie, so $4 to play a board game for the same amount of time is actually a really good value. For longer games, I'd say half that amount. So have a more realistic standard of maybe like 5 times in your life. And then for shorter games, like party games, I would say try to aim more for 20 because you're going to play those a lot. Next up, I look at Masterability. And this is really, do players with experience or players with strategy win? This is one of those ones where taste is going to have a big portion to deal with this. Because if you really like a game that's masterable, where you can control all of the variables and win every time if you get really good at it, then you're going to want a 5 out of 5 on this. But if you're more of somebody who's really light and airy and likes to play a game where there's a little bit of, ooh, like I don't know if I'm going to win or not, then you're going to want to get a game that's probably more like a 4 out of 5 in Masterability, or maybe even a 3 out of 5 in Masterability. But I've found that very few people truly like playing a game where the person with strategy and experience never wins, because they don't lose because they weren't good at the game. They lose because the game isn't good to them. Get a game that's good to you. Next up, in Novelty of the mechanics, you're looking for a whole new world of board gaming. You're looking for things that really make you feel like they did something new, not with the theme, but with the mechanics. You want to see how they're mixing up old mechanics in a new way, how they're adding a brand new mechanic you've never heard of. You want to look for those things that are really going to have lasting power on your shelf because they're so unique. Synergy of the mechanics is
all the little cogs mesh together.
Basically, everybody's going to want a game that feels really well synergized. And if you don't know what synergized means, it just means when everything works together, where if you do something, you know it's going to have an effect on something else, which will have an effect on something else, which will make you get points and help you win. So you want this to be probably a 5 out of 5 or a 4 out of 5 at the worst. Simplicity is looking more at this question: would I show this to a new gamer? Now, of course, this is one of those categories where for different people that's going to matter more or less. If you know that you have a lot of gamers in your life, this category is not going to matter to you very much. But if you're trying to find a game for a kid, or your mom who has only played Trouble or Parcheesi, or your grandma who's only played Bridge, you want to find games that are simple enough that they are going to be able to get right into it and play it. Simplicity isn't talking about thought. It's meaning, how much do you have to learn to play the game? How much are you playing against the game and not the other person? Universality of mechanics is if most people, most places, at most times would like the game, then it's higher on universality. It's like a 4.5 or a 5.
You know what else everybody like? Parfait.
If it's a game where like maybe 5 people I know would like it, it would be a 1 out of universality. Again though, this, like simplicity, is one of those things that it's not bad for a game to get a 1 out of 5 in universality. That game's only going to have a few places and times where it's going to accomplish the goal of bringing a fun time. And that's great. Just make sure you have those situations, because if you don't, you're going to have a dust collector that costs you a lot of money. All right, in mechanical theme, we're looking at how well the mechanics fit with the theme. And this is something that I would say you should be looking for games that give you a 5 out of 5 on this. If a game isn't giving you at least a 4.5 or a 4 out of 5 on this, it's not really a great game. It's not even a game I would almost put on my shelf. Why would you play the game that doesn't evince any theme when you could get the same exact style of game that has theme dripping off of it? Next up, artistic theme. Now, artistic theme makes me think of this scene.
Oh, you're a villain, all right. Just not a super one.
Yeah? What's the difference?
Presentation!
And it's the same way with board games. The difference between a super board game and a board game is presentation. And that's what you want from a game. You want a game that while you're playing it, the pieces and the art and everything about the game makes you feel what that game is about. Next up on thought, Thought is saying, do you want to think through the problem more? And there are those games that you get done with and you immediately start talking to the person next to you about what you or they could have done better and how you thought through the problem and what mistakes you made. Those are games that get a 5 out of 5 on Thought. And those are the kinds of games that if you want a game that makes you think, you want 5s out of 5s. I would say, though, that any game that's below a 3 out of 5 in Thought is very rarely going to be a good game. The exception to this, I would say, would be a few of the beginner board games and then party games. Energy of the Mechanics is almost the exact same thing, but instead of wanting to think through the problem more, you want to feel the energy more. If you want to relax, and you get out a relaxing game, you should be super excited to be relaxed by that game. If you get out a stressful game, you should be super excited to be stressed by that game.
I'm so excited.
Whatever feeling you're going for or energy you're going for, the game that you take out should be a game that makes you immediately start feeling and thinking that before you even start playing it. Total score. Now, obviously the total score is just taking all of those and averaging them out. But the big thing about this is you need to get games that are the type of game that when you need to use it, you will immediately think, oh, that game's great, and you'll love this game, and it will be great for this situation, and you pull it off the shelf with excitement. All right, so that's how I would recommend choosing a board game. Now, of course, this is not universal. This is just some tips from somebody who's done a lot of research and spent a lot of time looking for board games. So I'd love to know, how do you do it? So that way, maybe I can update my system based on some of the really good stuff you've thought of. And as always, please go down and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button, for you guys are truly
My favorite deputy.
And as always, thank you so much for joining us today on Rest and Reason.